So if you're listening to this, anywhere from $500 to $2,500 for a paid talk is not crazy pants. That might seem like a lot of money to you. It might seem like a little money to you. But here's the thing, getting paid to speak, you get to choose what your number is. That is completely up to you. There are no rules. There are no rules around it. Because here's the thing, the market will tell you if it's too high. Like if you have a really high rate and then you keep getting no, 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 no's, well, that's going to tell you you're charging too much. So I like the ranges that Dory gives. I think that's really helpful to have some reference points, but ultimately you have to decide what your fees are. So let me walk you through a couple tips here to consider for choosing your fee, but more importantly, actually collecting that fee from a client. Well, hey friend, welcome to the money episode today where we're digging into speaking fees. Specifically, I'm going to share some tips and strategies to help you charge more when you speak on a stage. And if you're thinking, I don't charge anything right now, I speak for free. I got you. I'm going to teach you how to get paid, how to charge your fee, how to increase your fee if you have it, if that is something that you would like to do. So here we go. This is going to be a good one today. Also, I'm just going to tell you right out of the gate, at the time of this recording, it has been a day and my mind and my mouth are not staying in sync very well, which actually becomes a very comical thing. However, I am on take number 5 of literally the first minute of this show. So we are fully committed and just sticking it out. So whatever happens for here, screw it. I am not redoing this thing. But I will, let me just side note tell you that even someone who speaks professionally and teaches others how to be so on point with their voices, words are freaking hard. And sometimes they're just not working. And that's okay. I think where we get in trouble is when we pretend that we're supposed to speak perfectly all the time. That's just not a real, that is not a real thing. So anyways, if you were looking for a super polished and professional show, I mean, I hope this is a polished and professional shows, but also I keep it real around here, which means that I do not give this false sense of every single thing is so perfect. I leave all the like flubby flubs in these shows. And I do that, one, because why take them out? That's part of natural human like conversation and language. But 2, y'all need to see that it's okay to not be perfect all the time. I mean, you don't want to be like a flubby mess for the majority of it, but here or there, it's totally fine. It's relatable. Anyways, back to the topic of the day. We're talking about money. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Heather, I speak for free because mostly speaking is a lead generator for my business. Again, if you're listening to this show, most likely you are selling digital courses or a membership or coaching services, and you're leveraging speaking as a way to get your name out there. That's perfectly fine. I would say you also will come across the opportunities where you actually could be paid to speak. So I want you to be open and prepared for that. Maybe that's not you right now, but that day will come. And when that day comes, what's going to happen is if you didn't have this episode today, you'd be like, holy crap, what do I charge? And then run to a Facebook group filled with people who may or may not have helpful information for you. And you'd ask them, what should I charge? And I don't want you to be caught on your heels. I want you to be prepared for when that day comes. And if you are sitting here going, I'm already getting paid to speak, buckle up, baby, because I'm going to teach you how to get paid more for each speaking gig. I'm going to walk you through some tips today around how I approach the money conversations on sales calls, specifically for speaking inquiry calls when I'm being asked to speak for a company or for a conference or inside someone's group. How I navigate that, I'm going to give you the literal tools, not literal tools. Oh my gosh, I'm having flashbacks to the Mimicking Your Mentor episode from a couple weeks ago where I talked about the word literally, and I hate it when people use it wrong, and I totally just did, but it's because it's ingrained in us. If you don't know what I'm talking about, fun episode, just a couple back, how to not mimic your mentors. I'm dying to hear what you think about that one. Anyways, I'm giving you some tips, some tools to help you venture into this conversation with more confidence. When I talk to people about their businesses, whether it's speaking, whether it's negotiating their fee, rolling out a new product or service, the thing that I hear a lot of people state is that they wish they felt more confident venturing into something. If you're thinking about that, like, I just need to be more confident. it's being the nature of business is we are going to have moments where we are uncertain of what's happening. So confidence doesn't come from knowing what's going to happen next. Confidence comes from your ability to figure it out. That's where this comes down. But I also find that you can have an increase in confidence from a structure. So bringing it back to the money conversation, I'm going to give you a structure today for you to develop what your rate should be and how to have that conversation. Because I think the structure will help you feel more confident going into that, where you will not be certain that it's going to work out exactly like you want, but at least you'll have the confidence of knowing that you have a process to fall back on. Okay, this one here, this episode, there is a full write-up on the blog. So if you want to come back to it, if you're listening in the car or you're watering your lawn or harvesting your vegetable plants, it's that season right now. I think my tomatoes are going outside. I am super excited for that. Yeah, I've become a little bit of a gardener. I killed half my plants, but the tomatoes are doing great. But if you're listening, you most likely are going to want to come back and take some notes on this. So you can head over to the blog at heathersager.com/podcast. You can get all the show notes from every episode, but this one is a little extra detail for you today because I know this is such a hot topic. Let's start with the conversation around speaking for free. I'm not going to dive into a lot of info today around like, should I charge? Should I not charge? I don't really want you to worry about that right in this episode. This is for if you have a speaking gig that you want to charge for, this is what this is for. Okay, I'm going to do some upcoming episodes around how to monetize a free speaking opportunity. There's also a link to prior episodes where I actually talked about different speaking strategies, whether or not you could speak for free or charge. I'll link back to some of those episodes so you have them. But right now, let's talk about this idea of charging for speaking. One of the most common questions I get is, how much should I charge? It's a laughable question. Although I do see other people online putting together calculators and have all these like frameworks to help you get to a price, but I fact checking when I've looked at actual speaker fees / hired speakers, none of them fall within any of those calculations. So cool calculators. You can find one online. I've gone through, I did that like 2 years ago. I'm like, I'm just curious, but it came back that I should be charging, I don't know, it was something really low. And I was already out there speaking for like 7 times the rate that the calculator pooped out. So personal opinion, the calculator I don't think don't use that as a fact. So here's what I would look at. Dorie Clark, author and pro speaker, he did a great write-up in the Harvard Business Review. If you're not familiar with Dorie, he wrote the book Entrepreneurial You. It's a great book. We'll link to it in the show notes. I read it a while back. But he talks about the business of speaking, and he had some really good ranges in here that I think are powerful. So shout out to Dorie. I'm going to read these again from the Harvard Business Review. I'll link to the article in the show notes. So he talks about, here's a good rule of thumb for appropriate pricing. Newbie speakers, he said, might earn between $500 and $2,500 for a talk. Beginning speakers or those more established with a brand with their first book might be 5 to 10. With several books and you have social proof, it might be 10 to 20, and then it goes up from there. And of course, celebrities and stars like make a ridiculous amount just for their time. I give you these and then say, like, don't get too caught up in the numbers. And it's because of this. It really depends on who your audience is and who the client is that's booking you. Because what they're going to pay is going to be based around their budget and their perceived value of what the talk's going to do for their group. So hear me when I say that, like, it really, really depends on the industry, on the audience, on the client. It's just got some big, big ranges. But what I see with a lot of my clients who primarily, again, have established businesses where the majority of the revenue is coming from their coaching services or digital products and programs, or they have like other areas of business where revenue is coming from. What I typically find is they're charging anywhere from $500 to $5,000 for a talk. The $5,000 are closer to people who are actually doing paid workshops and they're getting onto more of a speaking circuit kind of thing. So if you're listening to this, anywhere from $500 to $2,500 for a paid talk is not crazy pants. That might seem like a lot of money to you. It might seem like a little money to you. But here's the thing, getting paid to speak, like, you get to choose what your number is. That is completely up to you. There are no rules. There are no rules around it. Because here's the thing, the market will tell you if it's too high. Like if you have a really high rate and then you keep getting no, 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 no's, well, that's going to tell you you're charging too much. So I like the ranges that Dory gives. I think that's really helpful to have some reference points, but ultimately you have to decide what your fees are. So let me walk you through a couple tips here to consider for choosing your fee, but more importantly, actually collecting that fee from a client. So number one, I want you to do your own research. It's easy for me to sit here and be like, oh, whatever the calculators, or oh, here's what this blog post says. But at the end of the day, you know your industry better than anyone else. So you have to actually dig in and say, where am I speaking? What are people who are already speaking in those places? What are they getting paid? Like, what's normal? This might mean you need to network with some other people who have done speaking in the places that you want to speak at and flat out ask them. A lot of people are willing to share. This might mean you need to look in, like do some Googling and ask a bit. I mean, just Googling how much to get paid for a speech. That's how I found this HBR review. Like you can Google that. Just go read for yourself. I want you to collect the information, and most importantly, don't put any of the people who write the articles, myself included, up on a pedestal that this is fact. There is no regulation. There is no like set of best practices when it comes to speaking fees. So you have to figure out what it looks like for you. And part of that is asking the question around, is speaking going to be a revenue driver for your business, or is speaking more of a authority positioning to help you get your name out there to sell your courses, your services, your books, whatever else that you have. So you have to think about what your strategy is for speaking. We talk a lot about strategy on this show. Only you know what your strategy is. Only you know your industry. You have to do your research. And then tip number two, you have to make a decision. The challenge that I see that a lot of people have is they do a lot of research, but then sit in indecision. They just sit kind of going like, well, now I have all this decision. And then they just sit on it. And when an opportunity comes, they're like stressed because they have to make a choice. I want you to get the decision making out of the way. So let's say right now you have done, let's say you did one speaking event, right? Where somebody asked you to come to their event and they paid you $500. And now you're sitting here going, you know, I really want to get paid $1,500 to speak. Do your research. Does it show you that that's a relevant thing? And when you're doing your research, you have to think about what's the value behind the content that you're bringing. Let me go off on a little tangent here and make this practicable for you. If you are let's say you teach marketing and you teach, for me, for example, I teach people how to speak on stages with like a high degree of comfort, but also a huge degree of results, right? How do you actually get results based off of your speaking? So let's say that I can teach people how to drive leads back in their business. And I talk to online entrepreneurs. So if I think about me being at a conference filled with my ideal clients, coaches and course creators, and knowing that I can not only deliver really good content on stage, but I really could deliver great content on the back end. If those people choose to follow me, I would sell them into my programs. So I'm going off on a tangent here, but you see my thinking here is like, where is this going to serve? Where can I serve the audience best? And where would this serve my business strategy best? But let me go back to the marketing example. So let's say you teach marketing, you teach people how to generate leads for marketing, and you want to talk to business owners in front of groups. Okay, if you are able to help the end user generate income based off of what they learn and apply from your talk, there's a high degree of value with that. So for example, if a company or a organization brings you in to be a speaker and you have a proven track record from your content and your talk can actually help people get results, you can then show how you can be more valuable to that organization to then be more valuable to the ultimate end users, i.e. it's okay for you to charge for your talk. It's a little harder to put a price on it when you teach things like mindfulness or habits or how to have better self-confidence or some of those like intangible things. There's this kind of saying in our industry where, it's so easy for people to market when they help people make money. But what about the other stuff? Those things are still valuable too. So just know your dollar amount that you're going to come at for yourself, you have the ability to go higher when you really can think about the value, like the tangible and perceived value of the end user. That was a little bit of a tangent there, but anyways, do your research and then decide on your rate. So if you were charging, the example was if you were charging $500 right now and you want to increase to $1,500, do your research and say, is this something that's relevant? Like, are other people doing it? And how can I communicate that value? Just brainstorming that. But if you're going to charge $1,500, just make the decision that when I book a talk, it's going to be $1,500. I know that sounds really straightforward. You're like, what do you mean? Just say it. That's what your rate is. Okay. Just boop. That's your rate. Pick your rate. Now, tip number 3 is what you're not going to do is when somebody says, hey, Heather, would you come speak to my group? And can you let me know what your fee is? You are not going to reply to that email with your rate of, yeah, I'd love to, $1,500. No. Tip number 3 is you always discuss the opportunity on a call. It could be a Zoom, right? Whatever you want to do, video or not video, it's fine, but it needs to be on a live back and forth at phone call at a minimum. This is a non-negotiable, and I know this might feel super old school, but this is really important. And here's why. People are not buying a loaf of bread off the shelf. They are not buying a box of cereal. Sure, they want to have content for an event or learning for their team, whatever the opportunity is. But it is not a like rolling up to Costco and just filling up a flatbed. Like, this is a nuanced conversation where there needs to be this dance back and forth in terms of how this talk, how your content is really going to help them get what they need. I don't know. Personally, I'm not just going to go do a wham bam, thank you, ma'am. Like, if somebody were just to call me and be like, hey, come deliver your generic canned talk to my group. And if I had no idea who really the group was or what the opportunity was, that's not setting me up for success, because I mean, I can't have the most relevant examples and really make sure that my content lands for that specific audience. And then number 2, I don't love the idea of like my content just going out to a group of people that I don't know anything about them. Although the irony here is I know nothing about you as you're listening to the podcast here, but I can make a set of assumptions because you're on the show. Anyways, I digress. It needs to be a conversation, okay? So especially if you are new to this idea of increasing your fees, get comfortable with selling. So the conversation can include something really simple where you're asking them questions. Ask them questions like, what's the event about? What are their goals for the event? Tell me about your audience. What are you hoping to achieve from this talk? What would be, here's that magic wand question everybody asks. Like, if I can wave a magic wand, what would be the ideal outcome you have for people coming out of this talk? Ask. Your goal in the conversation is to understand, which means the only words coming out of your freaking mouth are questions. Questions. You want to get to know them. And then after you have a good understanding of what they're looking for and what success looks like, then you can start painting the picture back to them around how you could put something together or how your content would help serve them in those goals, would help serve them in the challenges they describe with their audience. You paint the picture. No, it's not a transactional thing of like, yeah, in 60 minutes, I could slam out a talk on marketing. No, you're going to say, okay, so what I think would be really amazing is if we started with a group by walking them through a blah, 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 blah. Give them a little taste around what you're thinking for the content. And then you can paint the picture of, and then we'll just give them a little taste around what you're thinking to shape the content and the format. So if you're thinking, hey, we can do this, something for 45 minutes, and then I'd love to bring a couple people on stage with me or do some interactivity or paint the picture. The goal here is to get them excited, for them to be able to feel that, yes, this is a really great fit for our organization. It's exactly what we were looking for. You want to get them excited, because then you're going to present the fee, your new price. And if they're already excited, there's going to be little questioning of what that fee is. So let's say previously, a week ago, your rate was $250 and today your rate's $1,000. When you get on the phone, if you build up that excitement and the deliver and my fee is $1,000, you're going to have far more confidence with that, because 1, you've done your research, and 2, you fully understand what the opportunity is. So you're going to actually deliver the rate on the phone. Now you're thinking here, like, what if they say no? So they say no. You have to, this brings me to my next 2 tips. Okay. Listen to me very clearly. We're not going into a full tutorial today on sales calls, although for those of you who are in Speak Up to Level Up, you know, we go that in detail, but I want to give you some things to consider. Tip number 4, I want you to predetermine your value adds. predetermine your value adds. What I mean by this, personally, I do not discount. I do not discount my speaking rates. It just creates a really cloudy mess. Instead, what I focus on is if I have a client and let's say that they're shy on the budget. So let's say I quoted them, let's say 10 grand for the talk and their budget was only 5, right? I'm not going to be like, oh, I could do it for 5. That's out of integrity for me. That's a boundary. I'm not doing it for 5 because that's not fair to my other clients who paid the 10. So for that perspective, what I would think about is going, okay, I need to uncover some pieces here to determine, is it really that it's a firm budget or is there some gap in value that they're seeing? So what I want you to think about is, are there some value adds in the digital world? We think about this as bonuses, but are there some value adds that you can bring to the table and kind of have it actually in your back pocket? Should pricing be an issue, you can add some things in. I was working with a speaker years ago. I hired her to come out to our organization, and she actually taught me this lesson very well. Her day rate for coming out to an organization was 18 grand, non-negotiable. And we wanted to hire her for, I think it was 3 days or something. So she had this non-negotiable fee. And she said something like this. She goes, I need to be in integrity with all of my clients. So the fee is non-negotiable. However, what I would be willing to do is do an additional webinar for your group before the event and also after the event, just to make sure that people are well prepared to maximize their experience over those 3 days. And then do that last webinar after to make sure, in case there's any follow-up or there's any roadblocks that comes up, we can work through those just to make sure you guys maximize your return on investment, or whatever phrase she used. But what I took away from that was she was so clear of going like, hey, this is my fee. But then she squashed the objections around, are we really going to get what we're hoping to in those 3 days by adding that quote unquote bonus. She didn't call it that, but she threw in 2 extra webinars to sweeten the pot, but also ease the apprehension. So I think you could probably do something similar. You don't have to add in a bunch of extra things, and please don't start throwing this at people. Don't start giving an extra of your time. Don't make that a default. But what you could do is you could sweeten it by having a workbook to go with it. Or maybe you do an extra call. You think about what's relevant for you. But what I like to predetermine is have a couple back pocket value adds. So that way you don't discount your price, but you could sweeten the pot to make the price more palatable. Maybe that's a weird way to say it, but I like the value add, not the just subtraction of money. Tip number 5, at the end of the day, I want you to be really, really firm on your boundaries. And this comes back to a lot of things. Shout out for the boundaries episode we had last year. Go back and check that out. I'll link to it in the show notes around setting boundaries and make sure you're clear around what those are and why you need them. But in the context of this conversation, I want you to know what your boundaries are for if they say no to your fee. Do you have a lower rate that you would be willing to do it? Or do you have boundaries in terms of when to speak? I.e., for me, Thursdays are a no-go. I do not do any kind of speaking on Thursdays because that's my day with my kids. Maybe for you, it's you don't do weekends. Or maybe for you, you won't travel. You only do virtual. I don't know what your boundaries are. Only you do. But you have to know what your boundaries are, because nothing's worse if you're on a call and a client's asking you for something and you start circling around it because you're not quite sure. But if you know your firm boundaries, you can know, okay, let's say you quote, okay, it's going to be $1,500. And they're like, sorry, we weren't planning on paying anything for the event. Okay, where do you go from there, right? That's where you get to determine, okay, hear me very clear. That's where you get to determine, okay, do you want to negotiate and just say or do you want to just say, okay, no, thank you. I wish you all the best luck for your event. Unfortunately, at this time, I'm not doing free speaking due to my prior obligations with clients, but thank you so much for thinking of me. Do you want to just shut it down and see what they do? Do you want to ask some questions? Do you want to open the door for negotiation? That could sound something like, I totally get, for a lot of times, I wouldn't say that. Let me actually say this again. This is me thinking on my feet to answer that question. So let's say you get on a call, you're like, it's $1,500. And I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't have the budget for it. You can say, I totally appreciate that. So just to clarify and bring in speakers, you were hoping that speakers to donate their times. And don't say it in like a passive aggressive way, just clarify, right? And then if they're like, yeah, we actually don't pay for speakers at all. Just say, okay, I really appreciate that. Unfortunately for me, at this point in my business, I'm not in a position where I'm doing free speaking engagements outside of, I don't know, maybe you say something, but I'm just not in a position to be able to do a free speaking event that month due to the prior obligations of my existing speaking engagements or my existing clients. Now, the question for you is, you're saying the fee of $1,500 is out of the budget, but is there any wiggle room for any budget for this event? You can be bold and ask that question. Is there any wiggle room for any kind of budget? I would only ask this question or pose that back if you are willing to negotiate your fee down and it's an event you really, really want to do. This comes back to your boundaries. You get to make the ultimate decision of if there's an event that you really, really want to do because it's great exposure, that you get in front of the right audience or you're on stage with people you want to be associated with, that might be worth saying yes by doing it for free. And there's no shame in that game. Like that can be totally a great thing. What you don't want to do though is have your fee and then say no and be like, well, I think I should do it for experience and then do it anyways. Like you need to be clear around, okay, I'm doing this for I'm doing it for experience or I'm doing it to grow my exposure. Like I don't want you to be resentful for saying yes if you do it for free. Though I will tell you, for me, I do a ton of free speaking. I speaking on people's podcasts, speaking in people's groups. I do free speaking because one, it's great practice, but more importantly, I speak for leads. I'm going to say this, and you should too. I get in other people's groups because I want them to become familiar with my work, talk about my work with other people, and ultimately either they sign up for my newsletter or follow me on social, or they refer their friends to me. That's the goal. That's why I speak. I speak to grow my business. That's the majority of the speaking that I do. You have to decide what you do for you. But if you want to get paid, know your rate, know your boundaries, and then start getting comfortable having the conversation. Do not hide behind email. Actually get on the phone and talk through with them. Now, if you find yourself in a conversation with someone and you're not quite sure to know how to navigate it, negotiation's not going well, or you're for whatever reason not comfortable pushing back on their fee, it's okay for you to take it out and think on it. So it's okay for you to be like, okay, all right, oh, your budget was only $300. Okay, let's pray the name of Sarah. Sarah, I don't think I can do it for 300. It just feels out of integrity for the rate that my other clients are paying. However, I'm really excited about this amount. I would love to find a way to make it work. So let me think on it for a bit. And then this is what I would do. Let me think on it for a bit. And then would you be willing to go back and look at your budget and see if there's any wiggle room on your end? And then can we reconvene maybe at the end of the week and see if we can come up with a win-win for the both of us? See how that doesn't sound a-holy? It doesn't sound like I won't do it. That could be a great strategy for you to leverage if you really enjoy the person and the organization you're having this conversation with. And note the key thing that I said there was I would like to think about it. And would you also be willing to go back and check your budget? I mean, they very well, okay, being on the other end of the budget for so many years, I can tell you this. Anytime you ask a company what their budget is, they're not going to give you the real budget. They are not giving you the real number. They are lowballing you. They're lowballing you because that's the nature of events. It's negotiation. Like it is a negotiation. So they are lowballing you. And if you just say yes out of the gate, if you just trust that they say, oh, our budget was 500, maybe it's true. But for the majority, it's probably not. Or they have a bigger budget, but they're trying to spread it across other speakers. So they're evaluating around. I'm going off on a tangent here. But I want you to say on the other end, as a speaker, as the business owner, I want you to be a little bit more bold and brave and wade into the conversation. And you can laugh and be like, oh, it's the money part. I know can be uncomfortable sometimes, but let's wade through it together and figure it out. You'll be fine. You will be just fine. But you first have to understand your industry and do your research. 2, you got to make a frickin' decision and say, this is my rate. What's the worst that can happen? Somebody says no. Well, that's why you need to know, like, you're going to have the call, right? And if they say no, that's where tip number 4 and 5 come in. You're going to know what your values are, value adds are to sweeten the pot, and you're going to know what your boundaries are. So you know when to walk away or negotiate. You have the power to charge more for your speaking events should you choose to. And you now have some tips and strategies and a little structure to help you do it with more confidence. This was a fun one. I went off on a couple side tangents here, but my brain is so full of ideas when it comes to talking about money and increasing your fees, whether it's in your business or on talks and stages. If you found value in today's episode, if you're like, this was like a good conversation, I really need to start thinking about how I can get better and more confident with this. If you think this would be a cool thing for your audience to hear or a business bestie, would you screenshot today's episode and share it? Or if you're feeling a little frisky / you're feeling very excited about this and you're going to apply some of these strategies, send me a direct message on Instagram because I actually want to hear which of these tips was the most resonating with you today. So shoot me a message over on Instagram at the Heather Sager. I can't wait to hear how you leverage what we covered today in your next talk and how you start making a little more money. Because why not? If your content warrants a pricing increase, go get it, baby. I'll see you on the next episode.